The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, spends as much as $50 million a year to employ nearly 200 armed agents at an average cost of $260,000 per year per agent. The American people would likely be disturbed to hear that. According to the nonprofit Open the Books, the EPA has spent millions of dollars over the years on anti-tank ammunition, amphibious assault craft, night vision equipment, unmanned aircraft, and other military equipment. It's difficult for me to imagine that the EPA has a legitimate use for anti-tank ammunition. To me, this sounds like we're arming a SEAL team. The difference is a SEAL team can explain why they need these things. The EPA cannot. These agents have been involved in raids in Alaska, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and in my own state of Alabama. In Alaska, EPA agents wearing flak jackets and carrying long guns showed up to review paperwork at a family-owned mining operation. In my home state of Alabama, armed EPA agents took over 2 waste treatment facilities in Dothan, Alabama. These agents were posted at each entrance to the plant and recorded identification information on all those going in and going out. The EPA is just one of more than 70 federal agencies that employed armed personnel, many of which most Americans would never associate with law enforcement. I think we need to take a step back and reevaluate whether arming the bureaucracy is the best way to ensure that our laws are enforced. Federal agencies should be able to demonstrate their need for armed personnel, and absent such a demonstration, should rely on and partner with local, state, or federal law enforcement when there is a need for armed protection.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine seek recognition?
I claim time in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I strongly oppose this amendment that would cripple the EPA's ability to exercise its criminal enforcement function by preventing the EPA criminal enforcement from being able to issue warrants, make arrests, or carry firearms. I'm truly befuddled by this attack on law enforcement. The majority's disdain for the EPA has been evident throughout the debate of this bill, but this amendment is beyond the pale. I cannot understand how anyone would think it is a good idea to give a pass to criminals who deliberately break the law. The EPA's criminal enforcement function is a vital part of our efforts to help protect the environment and safeguard the public health. But it's important to recognize that it is only one part of these efforts. The fact is that EPA's compliance and enforcement process is a multi-step process that uses criminal law enforcement only as a last resort. EPA initially provides compliance assistance to help the regulated community understand and comply with regulations. EPA compliance monitoring then subsequently assesses compliance through inspections and other activities. Enforcement actions are initiated only when the regulated community does not comply or when cleanup is required. Criminal actions are usually reserved for the most serious violations, those that are willful or knowingly committed. But the mere threat of criminal action can and does help ensure compliance. If this irresponsible amendment passes and we remove the threat of criminal action, we will inevitably see a decline in willful compliance of our environmental laws. That would be bad news for all of us, as the quality of our air and water and the public health will inevitably suffer. As to the issue of EPA personnel carrying firearms, I would point it out that more than 70 federal agencies employ law enforcement officers who are authorized to carry firearms and make arrests in the United States, including the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the Food and Drug Administration, the Tennessee Valley Authority. The EPA is hardly unique in this regard. Make no mistake, this amendment is clearly anti-law enforcement. It cripples the ability of EPA to ensure enforcement of our environmental laws and will inevitably lead to even more harm to public health. Let's ensure that the EPA can continue to enforce our nation's environmental standards. I urge the defeat of this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm stunned to hear the response to this coming from the other side that supports defunding the police. What we want to do is have proper law enforcement enforcing our laws and not weaponizing the entire federal bureaucracy against the citizens of the United States. I can't imagine why the EPA would need anti-tank ammunition to enforce the laws of the EPA. We've seen what this leads to in multiple examples, which I will not go into at this point. The critics claim, though, that my amendment would put EPA personnel at risk of harm. That would be wrong. My amendment does not permit the EPA from using funds to provide security for its personnel or its property. It does not prohibit training of EPA security or law enforcement personnel either. My amendment would prohibit funding for the EPA's armed and militarized agents who have a history of intimidating Americans by conducting aggressive raids and begin to address the troubling trend of militarization of our federal agencies. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment, and I yield back.